I made this 2D drawing actually in 3D, so this is what I did. Initially, I was gonna tackle this like any other character of mine for games. Gathering reference in the first place was pretty quirky. Speaking of reference, I was being inspired by this artwork I found on Pinterest. I'm gonna link it in the description if I find the author. However, I found the reference of the reference, so that was pretty neat. I'm sorry guys, at this point, I've been recording for a while and my roommate went to sleep, so I'm gonna be a little bit less enthusiastic, but you'll still be hearing me nicely. I ended up remodeling this 4 different times with different techniques. The workflow I settled for was creating the base shapes as usual I would with a character, then posing the character, and then retopologizing all the wings and the brush strokes I was gonna make half transparent. When you do 2D, you really have to think about how much detail you put in the foreground and the background. As for texturing, it's honestly pretty simple. I started with just plain gradients and plain lights just so I don't have to do those by hand, and then I started just literally painting. It reminds me of that one video where they asked the arcane artist, how did you make a painterly effect, and they answer, we painted it by hand. Something like that basically. The way I approached it was getting most of the colors in, then doing opacity, and then doing the rest of the details in. That way I was getting the more final idea and image as I went. When it came to opacity, I was struggling a little bit because of how Substance Painter calculates brush strokes, and it does it by verts, like in the air instead of the UV space. So sometimes my strokes would go through the planes, which is exactly what I don't want happening. But the way I would avoid doing that is by creating a folder and masking the folder with the specific planes I want, avoiding the ones I don't want, of course. And by creating multiple folders like that, I was able to toggle on and off the planes I don't want seeing at the moment. For example, in the beginning of my texturing phase, I turned off all the planes that had my artistic brush stroke. So far, the textures look a little bit underwhelming, but it's gonna start doing it when we put it back into Blender. After I plugged the opacity and the color back in and got some reference information. Back in Blender, I realized some of my detailed brush strokes were not enough. So what I did, instead of like re-UVing everything and redoing in Substance, I literally grabbed the already existing ones and I moved them and duplicated them in a way that works. I didn't have too many issues except for one called it looks amazing in material preview, but then it looks not so great in rendered view because of the shadows that would just occur by itself. I am always told that presentation is like #1 thing you have to look out for, which is totally true, and that's why I was doing my 3-point lights that I always do. Those were not looking good. So I tried a lot of the cycles with Eevee. I found a tutorial how to make flat lighting, but the quirk was I could not use opacity if I would use that thing of literally just plugging the color map into the surface without the BSDF. What I opted for was turning off ray tracing in Eevee. I don't know what specifically it does, but it literally got rid of my shadows. Last but not least, I decided to add a little bit of a blue because that's the vibe that's coming from the original reference, and that made a huge difference. That is the final output. I rendered some images to make the cool transition, and I got everything ready for my ArtStation and LinkedIn post. I hope you liked this video, you found it inspiring to do something else. Ask me any questions down below, I'll do my best to answer them, and see you in my next video. Bye bye!